This one is going to be a long one, let me tell you. Hello gorgeous, welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new, and if you are new, it would mean so much if you guys hit the subscribe button to join my YouTube family. But as you can tell by the title, today's video is going to be all around my experience working in a group home at 18 years old. If you guys have been an OG follower, then I'm sure you know that I worked as a mental health worker for 5 years. So I started when I was 18, about to be 19 years old, all the way till about 23. I wanted to do a whole video around my experience. I also asked you guys on my Instagram, which shameless plug, if you're not following me, definitely do. It's at Nicolettaxoyt. But I asked you guys to ask me a bunch of questions of whatever you had when it comes to my experience as a mental health worker and working in a group home. And I have to say, you guys have actually sent me some really good questions. So I took screenshots of some interesting, juicy questions, and I'm gonna answer them throughout this video. It was definitely a rewarding and fulfilling job, but at the same time, it was also at points a very demanding job. So I definitely wanna give you both of the ups and downs of the 5 years that I worked there, and it was a huge part of my life for a very long time. I thought maybe someone would be interested. I don't really know, but hopefully you guys find this interesting. If you do, thumbs it up. It always helps me out, and let's just get right into my experience. One of the main questions I kept getting is how I got the job. At the time, I was actually doing a degree in psychology. So I attended the University of Ryerson in downtown Toronto. I'm Canadian. Hey to anyone that's Canadian. And I was taking a 4-year undergrad degree in psychology, and I went into my degree wanting to work with mental health and addictions. That was just so interesting to me and such a big passion of mine. So how this job stumbled upon and kind of came to me at such a young age was my parents were actually out at a family friends party for my family friends' kids that they have. There was this lady there that was also a family friend of my mom's friend, and my dad was kind of just talking about me and what I did and how I was in school for psychology. So this lady was telling how she worked for a mental health agency, and she was one of the supervisors there, and totally recommended me to apply for the student program and for me to go contact her. And I was super excited when my dad told me, because if you guys are ever taking a psych degree, especially in Canada, and you're in university, they don't really provide you with any real life experience. So the 4 years is just you reading, doing tests and exams, and you don't have that experience. And a lot of jobs in Canada, you need the experience, but universities don't provide it for the most part. Well, I know that was for me in my program. There really wasn't experience to gain from the 4 years. So I was so excited to get this opportunity, and I was all in and wanted to apply. So every single year at this mental health agency, they have this summer program where you can apply as a student and do kind of like a 3-month gig there and get the experience. I applied and I ended up getting the job. I feel like it was between like June to August, I believe, but I'm not too sure. It's been so long, but it was the whole summer, and you had to work from Monday to Friday, 40 hours a week. You couldn't miss a week, and you had to be there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day, Monday to Friday. When I was going in for the interview, they were kind of asking me questions like, what would you do if a potential client started to get aggressive or hit you? And I was kind of like confused, and I remember not knowing what to say at all to that question. I don't even know what I made up in my interview, but I said something. But I remember hearing that and being so confused because I didn't really know what I was going into, to be honest. But nonetheless, like I said, I got the job as a summer student. They asked me if I wanted to work with the youth or adults. So this mental health agency provides so many different programs. They provide so many services to children, youth, transitional aged youth, and adults. And one of the programs that they provide is residential services and day programs and stuff like that. And I really wanted to work with adults, so I asked for the adult home as opposed to youth. At the time, I was working as a gymnastics coach, and I actually did both jobs the whole time, but I kind of wanted to get the experience working with adults. I was so used to working with kids constantly in my gymnastics, and I always wanted to work with mental health addictions when it came to adults. So I thought that was a perfect time for me to get that experience. So I asked for the adult house, and that is what I got. And I remember starting on a Monday and just going in, And I remember walking into my first day of work, and I remember it like it was yesterday because it was the most chaotic day for me to walk in on, and I had no idea what was going on. But I definitely learned my ropes and learned how everything worked, and I did really end up enjoying it. In this home, who basically can apply and access this home, like the type of clients we take in, we would take in clients with dual diagnosis, meaning they had to, one, have some sort of mild to moderate developmental disability, and as well as have mental health challenges, or they were on the autism spectrum disorder, and they also had to have significant behavioral challenges. So we take in usually clients that had considerable difficulty remaining at home or in less intensive group home atmospheres. So we definitely took in clients that are a lot more challenging and can be aggressive, to say the least. I work with people that have schizophrenia, bipolar, severe depression, drug addiction, sexual abuse, FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. I also worked with the autism spectrum disorder, so I worked with clients that were verbal and nonverbal autism. So I worked with definitely a wide array of different types of mental health challenges. I definitely got to really get that real life experience of really working in the mental health field while I was studying. I really enjoyed working there for the summertime, but usually after the summer, the students just go back to school, and that doesn't really guarantee you that you're gonna get a part-time job or anything. But lucky enough, the supervisor at the house I was working at really liked me and liked how I was working, and he actually asked me if I could apply as a part-time and become an actual official part-time worker for the mental health agency. And I was ecstatic because that was really the end goal for me. I didn't want to just do a 3-month program and then I can't work there anymore. So I was really trying my hardest to do the best job possible and learn and really get involved so that potentially I could become a part-time worker. After I finished my summer program, which I believe was at the end of August, I went back and I had to apply, get interviewed. So I remember I went back in October. So I had about a month and a half to 2 months off of my work before I officially got hired as a part-time worker. So as a part-time worker, you can actually jump around and work at different group homes. You don't have to work at one specifically. You can go to all of them if you want. You could go to one, you could go to just the youth group homes, but I decided to stay at the group home that I was working at because I was still in university and I also was doing my gymnastics job, so it was already a lot for me. And a lot of you guys asked, what does it look like in a day of working in a group home? So when you go in a group home, there's 3 different shifts. So they have the 8 to 4 p.m. shift, which is the morning shift. They have the 3 to 11 p.m. shift, which is the afternoon shift. And they have the night shift, which is usually starts between 10 to 11 p.m. till 8 to 9 in the morning. There's 24/7 hour care for these residents. Of course, these clients live there 24/7, so there always needs to be 24/7 staff on. So I would typically work the afternoon shifts, usually 3 to 11 p.m. When I was off from school, sometimes I would do the 8 to 4 shift, but I never did the night shift. I only did the night shift actually a few times because of cancellations of the staff last minute. I was asked because, to be honest, they were desperate. That was one thing that happened a lot. People, because there's a lot of people had this as a part-time job and were going in and out, a lot of people would cancel their shifts sometimes like a minute before their shift started. So when that would happen, you'd pretty much be in a pickle where you were asked sometimes to even work double shifts. There always had to be support there, especially with the clients that we had in our group home. There has been times where I've pulled double shifts constantly. The longest shift I ever worked was from 2 p.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning. So that was my life at one point. I worked as a part-time staff for a few years, and then the group home that I was constantly working at, that I started off at, was actually starting to lose our clients. Our group home is more of a transitional home, so it's not like a full-time permanent living situation. So for the most part, our job is to build their social skills, build their skills in general, help their needs, kind of give them that counseling and that attention that they need, and eventually eventually the goal is to move them on to more of a long-term living, that they're pretty much going to live there forever, and integrate them into one of those types of living situations. So at this point, my clients were kind of all getting put into long-term homes, I guess. And so there wasn't that many clients at one point. And of course, the people that got the hours are the full-time workers first and then part-time workers second. But I really didn't have a choice, and I remember being like, I need more hours. So I ended up trying another group home that was the other adult home that they had. And I heard some things about this home. I heard the clients were a lot more challenging when it came to behavioral issues. There's a lot more incidents, but I was excited. I wanted to try it out, and I ended up doing really great there as well. And my supervisor at the time at that house really liked my working style and asked me to apply as a full-time worker there. So that is what I did, and I became a full-time worker right when I got out of university. So surreal to me, because if anyone knows psychology, a lot of the times it's really difficult to find a job out of university, especially where I live. I can't really speak for other countries, but this is all obviously my experience, and it depends on where you live because everywhere is different, of course. But I was so excited to have kind of like, you know, this big girl job fresh out of school. When you're a full-time worker, you're assigned a specific client. That doesn't mean you can't work with all the other clients in the home. It just means that you're responsible for that client when it comes to their daily programming, their schedules, their appointments, if they have any doctor appointments, psychologist appointments, psychiatry appointments, anything like that. And you're kind of responsible to reassess their program, seeing what they need help on, what you need to add, what you need to remove, what's not working. You're just known as their primary worker. Oh, another thing I want to add is a lot of people are kind of asking how you get the job, and usually when you get this job, people do have some sort of educational background. It doesn't necessarily need to be psychology. I know that a lot of people at that job actually had child and youth worker education background. So you can have a variety of different backgrounds in education, but you do have to have some sort of education in that field. But as well, when you actually get hired, you also have to do things while you're there. So of course you got to get trained for CPR. You got to get also trained for CPI. And if you guys don't know what CPI is, it's a crisis prevention intervention. It's pretty much a course that teaches you what to do if you have a client that kind of escalates and can potentially get aggressive. It teaches you kind of things, non-violent interventions to do, and how to de-escalate your client if your client is kind of struggling, kind of having a behavioral outburst. You actually had to do your CPI training every single year. You had to get it renewed. It definitely was something that you had to do, and that would come in use throughout your time working in the group home. I know that someone asked like what it's like in group homes. I know for group homes, they're completely different from one another. Like I said, my group home was specifically taking in clients that had dual diagnosis and also had severe behavioral challenges. These are the clients that pretty much didn't do well in a group home that wasn't as supervised or wasn't as intensive, because some group homes, they don't have aggressive clients, so it's very different. Some are more for teenagers, so I can't really say how it is in different group homes. This is just working for the one I worked with. So I got asked a few questions, and I wrote down some questions here. So one of the questions I got is, a group home the best place for mental illness, and does it stop drug use and violence? Different things are going to work for different people. It also depends on the severity of the person and the individual and what their mental health status is. So I don't necessarily think group homes are always the best option for someone that has a mental health issue. When it came to our group home in specific, you couldn't use drugs or any of that kind of stuff. Like, that was just not allowed. It was very structured, and people weren't just allowed to come in and out of the group home. Clients were never really on their own. There was always one-to-one support for the most part when it came to our clients in specific, but I know in other group homes, people could just leave and come without having to constantly be with the support worker. But in specific for mine, it was an intense program that we did. Usually the program was supposed to last for 2 years before our clients would move on. But of course, if we didn't have like a home for our clients to go to after 2 years, we would keep them. I had clients that were there for 5 years because there was just no place that was willing to take our client as of yet. So one of the questions that I got asked and I wanted to talk about was, did I experience anything scary while while working as a mental health worker. So I've actually had so many different experiences working in the group home that I did. I definitely was in situations that were extremely scary. Probably the scariest that comes to mind with me was I've had situations where clients have pulled out weapons and on other coworkers, and it was a whole situation. Of course, we've had times where we've had to call the cops to come because it was just a very unsafe situation. It has to be a last resort for you. We have a lot of steps to de-escalate the situation before going ahead and calling the cops. So when that happens, you know that something was going on in the house. Unfortunately, I've had times coworkers get severely injured by certain clients, and they actually got out of a job because of it, because they were so injured they couldn't even come back. One of my coworkers ended up getting so injured that she broke different places, like I think 3 different bones, her shoulder and something, and somewhere else, her arm, her shoulder. And she was no longer able to work, and she was a full-time worker, so she was no longer able to do the job because of her injuries. And so that was a really hard thing. So one of the questions I got asked is, would I recommend the job? Personally, for me, I really enjoyed the job. I have to say it was a passion of mine. I loved going to work. When it comes to where I live, they definitely underpay employees, and I will totally be someone that advocates for higher pay for people that do this job, because this job is a very important job and the pay is just not where it should be at all. I know so many people at that job that were there that were living paycheck to paycheck, and they're dealing with so much. When I came in, I was young, so it was a lot easier, I think, for me to separate work from my real life. I found the people that were working there that were older and had families, it was a lot harder, I think, for them to separate the two, and sometimes they would take it more personally, and that is when it can kind of become emotionally draining. There's a high rate of burnout at that job, but if it's your passion and that's what you really enjoy, I totally recommend it. Kind of what my goal was, my focus was to eventually move up. I was always really interested in therapy and maybe even potentially becoming a psychologist before all this YouTube stuff came about. In the end, you build such big attachments with your clients. A question I got was it hard to be friendly with your clients? So one thing, when you walk into the place that I worked at, you have to make sure that you don't take things personally. There are going to be times when your client might be having a rough day and might take it out on you by maybe getting aggressive towards you or saying all the names in the books to you, and that's just something that you kind of have to expect. You can't take things personally. You have to remember that these clients, they're there for a reason. They have a lot of struggles, and that's why you're there, to help them through those struggles. Really actually heartbreaking, a lot of the clients that came into my work, not only did they struggle with so much, but them being raised as a child, you hear the stories, so it's kind of upsetting to see that, and you kind of have to keep that into mind. And I think in the end, it's so nice to see your clients grow. Usually when you first get a client, they don't want to be there, and that's usually when their outbursts are aggressive outbursts, and they're trying to always leave, and then they kind of get used to the schedule and they start to build relationships with all of us, and then you see them by the end after even a year or 2 years, and they've changed so much from when they first walked into the door. And I think that's the most rewarding thing, and it just makes you feel good, and it always would make me feel good seeing someone succeeding at a certain skill or learning how to handle certain situations that come to them. Another question I want to answer is, did you ever have to deal with cases that affected your mental health? So I actually have to say I did a really good job in separating it, but I definitely do know people personally have gotten so burnt out that they had to take leaves of absence. I think I did a pretty good job at learning that you have to separate it from your personal life, and you can't bring work home to your home life, because then the lines get blurred and you're gonna end up burning out. And it's important to also remember that your mental health is important. You want to be the healthiest you can be, obviously, to help people, and if you're not healthy mentally, then how are you going to help someone that also is struggling and dealing with mental health challenges? Another question I got is, would you use your degree again? That is always something I kind of go back and forth with. It's something that is definitely still a passion of mine. Like, just because I'm doing YouTube right now doesn't mean that I am not passionate at all about that. I was doing YouTube on the side when I was working at my mental health job, but I still love psychology of the brain. It's so interesting to me and I enjoy it. I would be open to maybe going back into the field eventually. The question I got is, what is it like working at a group home, like regulations, etc. The group home I worked at was actually very intensive care. There's usually one-on-one with clients for the most part. Sometimes you didn't have to be one-on-one. It really depended on the client, but the second home I went to was a lot more intense than the first one. The second one was a lot more one-on-one with the client, and they couldn't really be on their own at that point. They live there. It's their home. They have a schedule. They have a certain wake-up time. They have chores they have to do. They have programming to follow. Sometimes they leave during the day for a specific day program. Each program is different to the client's needs, of course, and what the client's goals and end are. Not only that, every single week when you work there, you always have a meeting. So once a week you would have a meeting with not only the employees working in the group home and the supervisors working in the group home, but you would have the behavioral therapist coming in, you would have a psychologist coming in, you would have the family social service worker coming in, and you would talk about the improvements of your clients, positive things that went on during that week, and if any challenges arose, and you kind of look at their program and seeing what needs tweaking and what doesn't need tweaking, and what's working, what's not working. Program is obviously designed to help them with certain life and social skills and certain needs, and as well as there's that side where we are responsible for taking them to their doctors, so their psychiatrists, psychologists. They also give a lot of family counseling. So there's a lot of services that are provided through this mental health agency. The last question I'm going to answer, because this is something I struggled with, and that was, how do you cope with coworkers that make you feel like you don't belong? So if you guys know the ending to why I stopped working there, I will have the video above and down below, but I was let go at the very end, and I was, to say the least, I was bullied at the end in a sense. So I started working in that mental health agency since I was 18 years old. So I was very young. I was 18 turning 19, and I was the youngest person there. For the most part, people working there were well in their 40s. I moved so fast from that student job to a full-time worker in just a short few years that didn't go well with too many people, especially the people that were there for a very long time, which I can see where they're coming from. I had no issues with any coworkers. When it started to have a difficulty with only a few coworkers, there were people that were still the nicest people to me, but there were a good group of workers that really made it difficult at the end. So right when I got hired as a full-time worker and I got that full-time position, that is when I saw a few coworkers shift. I was excited to go into work to work with my clients, and at some points if certain coworkers were on, I was like not looking forward to it. These are people that I worked with since I was 18 that knew me, and I worked with them for a few years and they were the nicest people to me, but right when I became a full-time worker, it was like a shift. I remember walking into my shift and I would say hi to a specific woman. She would roll her eyes and turn her back around, and I remember my supervisor at the time ended up seeing that and having a talk with her because it was completely clear what was going on. It was really rude. When you're a full-time worker, you are responsible for putting the other employees to a certain client and kind of delegating how the shift is kind of go, and you have to delegate all of the responsibilities to coworkers. And that was really difficult for me at the beginning because I was so young, I guess. People didn't want to listen to me and wouldn't listen to me and wouldn't do the things that I would ask them to do. So if I said, okay, today you're gonna be on cooking, you're gonna be on this client from this time to this time, and you're gonna be responsible for the many counts or for doing this certain report at the end of the night, we would have to do that every shift. It was just normal, what you would do every normal shift. But when I became full-time and I started doing that, there was a huge issue at the start of that. One employee that was so angry that I became a full-time worker that she would constantly go down to my supervisor without me knowing and making up lies saying I wasn't working and that I was doing stuff that I wasn't doing, I guess to try and get me fired. Supervisor at the time actually told me that this certain individual did that, which I feel like you shouldn't be doing that because I probably shouldn't know that this person was making up lies and saying I wasn't working and doing all that stuff. But my supervisor at the time really liked me and he was the one that told me to apply as a full-time, so he knew that what she was saying was a lie. So I definitely struggled a lot with that, them thinking that it wasn't fair, I guess. That's all I can take from that, because before I became full-time workers, they were so nice to me and there was no issues, and it was just as soon as I became that full-time worker, it's like everything changed. But of course, that's not all the coworkers. There are still my coworkers that are the sweetest people and have hearts of gold, that are such amazing people. But you are gonna deal with those other people that just honestly are questionable with their intentions. That was probably one of the hardest struggles, but I think what really kept me focused is my clients and having the best interest for them and wanting the best for them and knowing what my goal was in the end and kind of ignoring it, because in the end of the day, they obviously have their own issues and I just kind of was doing my own life and not really focusing on that negativity because it really wasn't worth it. We all had the same interview, so if they went with a certain individual, then they obviously wanted to go with that certain individual, and that's just how it works in life. Sometimes you get opportunities and sometimes you don't, and you can't really take that out on other people that have done nothing to you. So I just kind of always brushed it off my shoulder and remembered the reason why I was there, and I was there for my clients because they would make me so happy. There was obviously a lot of struggles in that work and a lot of chaotic things that I saw that I feel like so many of you don't even know some of the things that I've seen. I don't even think if I ever got that job I would never see my entire life, but I was definitely exposed to things that could be seen as very traumatic and very difficult, but in the end of the day, I still loved it and I enjoyed going to work. And even if you ask my friends or family, I enjoyed going to work. It was so fun for me and it was such an amazing time in my life that I will never forget, and I still think about my clients to this day and hope that they're obviously doing well and that they are thriving and hopefully succeeding. It's rewarding to know that I had such an impact on certain people's lives and to see such this success in certain individuals. I think that is so rewarding and so worth it, even though there obviously are going to be difficulties with every single job. That is my experience working at a group home at 18 for 5 years. If you guys want to hear more and you want to know more, ask me questions on Instagram, follow me there at NicolettaXOYT, ask me questions in the comments. I could do a part 2 if you guys leave questions in the comment section. I can go more in depth on certain situations I was in, but I would love to do another video on it. This is something that I've always been so passionate about, so talking about it is super fun for me. I absolutely love that time in my life and it taught me a lot of things. It really also exposed me into understanding the world of mental health. I think that that's obviously such a significant part of life. It's been so stigmatized for so many years. It's starting to become obviously not as stigmatized, but it's still, mental health is still stigmatized and not where it should be. The first time I remember being interested in mental health and addictions and stuff like that was when I was like 13 years old. So that has always obviously been a passion for me. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to join my YouTube family. I do upload every single week. And on that note, I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!